Good morning. It's 9 o'clock and time for the first meeting of the Board of County Commissioners of 2019. We're going to begin with a moment of silent reflection for the first responders, which will be followed by an invocation by Pastor Randy Bryant of Ryanwood Fellowship Church. And then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Susan Adams. Please rise.
Father, we do thank you for the blessings that you've given each of us. And even as we pause to remember those first responders, we thank you for their service. Thank you for their sacrifice. We pray that you'll bless their families and that you'll comfort them today as only you can. We pray that you'll supply their needs each and every day from this point forward. Thank you that death is not the end, but it's the beginning. We pray that you'll bless them and their memories. We thank you, Lord, for the blessings that you've given us, the blessings we have by living in this country, the blessings we have by living in this particular county. You have blessed us abundantly, and we remember that Scripture tells us that all good things come from the Father above, and we thank you for that. Thank you, Lord, for public servants, for those who are willing to serve for the betterment and the benefit of the greater community. And we pray today as the commission meets that you'll give them wisdom, that you'll give them the insight they need in the decisions they make. We know that James tells us if we lack wisdom, that we can ask of God and he will give it liberally. And we thank you for that promise, and we count on that today. Pray that you'll give them the courage to make the decisions that need to be made, and that you'll bless them as a result of their efforts. We pray for each servant that's represented here, that you'll continue to bless them as they serve you. We ask your blessings upon our community and upon our country as we continue to move forward. For it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Please join me in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Pastor Bryant, for that prayer. We'll move on to additions and deletions to the agenda. Commissioners, any additions or deletions?
Mr. Chairman, I just think staff has put out some updated information on the public hearing item.
So there's the updated information on the ordinance that will be available on the website if anybody has any interest. Anything else from anybody?
To the chair, I believe Mr. Mensing had asked to have his item pulled from today. He was not able to make it.
Yes, that public item will be deleted. Anything else?
Move approval as amended.
We have a motion as amended from Commissioner Flesher, seconded by Commissioner Adams. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. And the first proclamation of 2019 is a great one. I'm so happy to announce that the Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival is coming back again. This is good. And we have people from the Frog Leg Festival here. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the resident expert on the Frog Leg Festival, Commissioner Susan Adams.
Thank you. As we hop into the new year, it's my pleasure to read a proclamation designating January 17th through the 20th, 2019 as Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival Days. Whereas the 28th Annual Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival will be held from January 17th through January 20th, 2019, and whereas the Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival showcases the unique local cuisine, resulting in frog legs and gator tail that are unsurpassed. And whereas the fame of the festival has reached beyond the borders of the county and state, with the Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival holding 2 Guinness World Records for most frog legs served in one business day, and the largest frog leg festival in the world. And whereas the Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival has attracted hundreds of thousands of visitors and tourists to the area. And whereas the proceeds are used to further recreation and park activities as well as support youth organizations in the North County area. And whereas the city of Fellsmere has been designated as the Frog Leg Capital of the World, and it is appropriate to recognize this festival as a premier event in Indian River County. Now therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the period of January 17th through January 20th, 2019 is designated as Fellsmere Frog Leg Festival Days, adopted this 8th day of January 2019 and signed by all 5 county commissioners. Thank you. Would you guys like to say a little bit about what's going on at the festival this year? It's always great to have the frogs with us.
We have a family of frogs this year. You see how the festival is growing. We have the family of frogs, and we have hopped on down here to help get y'all to celebrate with us. And apparently what we're talking here, you can't hear me loud enough, but we are thrilled with the proclamation, and thank y'all very much for recognizing the success of the festival and the hard work that the volunteers do. Over 250 volunteers put the festival on. And we've raised well over $1 million for North County activities. So thank y'all very much. We're proud to accept this. I think the last one we had was 2004. So we're glad to be on your agenda and look forward to seeing y'all all out there enjoying legs and tail. Thank y'all for being with us.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Commissioner Fleischer.
Well, we have the benefit of having the mom of our resident expert, the mom of the Fellsmere Frog Lake Festival, and County Commissioner. Could I ask a question? Did you ever envision the very first Frog Lake Festival would have come to what it is today?
Not ever.
And can you bring us all back for the benefit of those who were maybe perhaps not here during that time as to the difference of yesterday and today?
Well, our first festival, the Highway Patrol actually had to direct traffic off of 95. The cars backed up on 95 and were a hazard. And we had the fortune, we didn't realize it at the time because we were panicked. We thought 500 pounds of frogs would be plenty to serve over the whole 4 days, and we ran out of that on Thursday night. I had to get all of our airboat buddies to head out into the marsh and catch frogs. And by Saturday morning, by Friday night we were out again. I had to send my kids out on their bikes and the golf carts and to any house that had an airboat in the yard and knock on their door. I don't care if it's 7 a.m. in the morning. See if they have frogs in the freezer. We'll be happy to buy them. And we struggled through the weekend to have enough frogs. And so the festival has taken off. We were blessed to be on Good Morning America in the first or second year with the T-shirt. And it has been off and running ever since. And yes, it's unique, and some articles call it weird, but you know what? It showcases a resource in Indian River County that the old-timers lived off of. They actually, had to make do with frogs and fish and gator, and so we're delighted to showcase those old things and have a great time. And between the carnival and the vendors, the arts and crafts, I never envisioned that we would have so many people. 100,000 people over 4 days has been the most we've had. So every year we pray for 4 good days of weather so we can have that 100,000 back. So thank y'all very much. And thank you, Joe, for asking about the old days, which seemed just like yesterday to me. And, I may have aged a little bit, and I kind of feel like the horse at the gate getting ready for the race. My heart is there. I just pray to have stamina to get to the end of it. So as we serve over 10, 12,000 plates of frogs and gator over those 4 days. So
Thank you.
Ample supply.
ample supply.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
It's fresher than the others.
That's the fix her head.
We'll see you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much.
Great festival. With that, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Anybody have any changes?
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve
Both.
from Commissioner O'Brien for the regular meeting minutes of November 6th and 13th, second by Commissioner Adams. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Information items, anybody care to pull an item from the information items?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to mention on the venue event that on January 19th, Saturday morning, there's the inaugural Rail Trail 5K run sponsored by the Executive Roundtable of Indian River County. This is should be a pretty neat event. It's going to be the first run ever across the bridge and back. And so for all those 5K runners out there, great time to be part of an inaugural trail run there, so.
And I'd recommend anybody who wants to come and watch to wear their sneakers and take a walk along there.
Absolutely, walk
Do
it,
that.
and after the race is over, you can ride your bike on it and stuff. It's a beautiful trail.
It's a great addition to Indian River County, and we're fortunate to have it. And we hope that everybody from Fellsmere and Sebastian uses it on almost a daily basis.
We pretty much do.
Excellent. Consent agenda. Anybody wish to have anything pulled from the consent agenda? I'll ask if there's anybody from the public who'd like any item from the consent agenda pulled for discussion. There being none,
Mr. Chairman, move approval.
we have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second by Commissioner Zork. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Move on to constitutional officers and government agencies. We have Indian River County Sheriff Law, who is here to request to schedule an executive session at a time certain. Sheriff, how are you today? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. This is just an informational item to move forward to a special call meeting next Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Mr. Rangel, do we have to do anything to approve it or just announce it?
In the past, I believe the board's actually approved it to be set at that time, so.
Move to
Move approval.
approve.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second by Commissioner Fleischer. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Sheriff. We'll see you next week. We move on to public items. The first public item is a public hearing on the biosolids moratorium. I believe we'll have Mr. Burke lead us on this one.
Actually, I will start off, although I can tell you that Mr. Burke knows more of the technical information than I certainly do. On July 17, 2018, the board approved an ordinance establishing a 180-day temporary moratorium on the land application of Class B biosolids on properties in the unincorporated areas of Indian River County. On December 11, 2018, after presentations by the county's consultant and also a representative from St. Johns River Water Management District, the board authorized the county attorney's office to draft the attached ordinance extending that moratorium. Per the board's direction, the county attorney's office has drafted another 180-day moratorium ordinance, which is in the backup. I will note that on Friday last week, the FDEP wrote a letter to H&H Liquid Sludge Disposal stating that H&H and the Presley Ranch will be refraining from taking the land application of biosolids for at least through 2019. Additionally, the city of Fellsmere will be considering a similar ordinance on Thursday night this week. I just want to thank the Presleys for their willingness to work with the county on this issue. Additionally, I want to thank the Corrigans as well, who have reached out to us and stated that they will not be using any biosolids in the future. So this has been really great work between the departments, the agencies, private landowners, and the county. So I think this is really important. And simply just the county attorney's office recommends that the chair open the public hearing, take any public comment, and then vote to approve the ordinances presented. And with that, I am available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Reingold? There being none, I will now open the public hearing, and I'll ask if there's anybody from the public who would like to speak on this item. Come on up to the podium, please. If you would, give your name and address for the record. This is great.
Hi, my name is Arlen Tompkins. I'm a resident of Indian River County, Vero Beach, for 5.5 years. I'm just here to ask the board to please extend the moratorium. I'm not a scientist, but I think our water is very important. I don't know really the economics of how much money that's received by Indian River County for accepting waste of others. I do know that counties just south of us have refused to take this waste. So I would appreciate when you consider this, that you approve the extension for another 180 days to give people a chance to look into it further. And my address is 1022 Near Ocean Drive, Vero Beach, Florida, 32963. And that's really all I have to say, that I urge you to support and favor this proposal.
And sir, if it's okay, I'd like to make 2 comments on what you said, just to clarify for the audience. One is, the way you said it, it could sound like Indian River County takes the biosolids and gets paid for them. We do not. None of the biosolids either come from Indian River County or have our blessing to come here. And then the other counties in the south actually had legislation passed which which would require anybody dumping biosolids in their areas to affirmatively show that they're not adding any additional P to the areas where they're dumping, which is a very high bar. And because of that legislation, that's led directly to counties to the south sending their biosolids north to areas that are not protected by that legislation. So I just wanted to clarify that, because this is not something we would want in the least, which we're working very hard to prevent. And we'll continue to work with agencies like the Department of Environment and Protection, St. Johns River Water Management District, to do all we can to protect our water. So thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for the education on that.
Well, I just, so sometimes when people listen in the background,
Just want to make sure there's no conflict here.
excellent, thank you.
You need this?
We don't.
Thank you very much.
Next up, name and address for the record, please.
Good morning, Paul Fafeta, President of the Coastal Conservation Association, Treasure Coast Chapter, and the Clean Water Coalition. Want to applaud you for this moratorium. As has been stated before, we wish it would go on much longer than the 6 months. The Indian River delegation meets soon, and I have sent out some requests that this be extended to the legislature to pass the Florida Farm Act, or amend the Florida Farm Act to give power back to the counties on these issues because of the ambiguous language that's in that particular law. But again, I want to thank you on behalf of the fish, the water, and the county, and everyone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
And
coming.
Happy New Year.
Come on up, name and address for the record, please.
My name is John A. Norris. I live at 566 Cross Creek Circle. I am a civil engineer, West Point grad, and I spoke last time. I'm a little mystified why we're discussing this here again. It seems to me common sense that we would support a moratorium on these type of biosolids. Me and my 10 neighbors along the river all support this moratorium. It should be made permanent as quickly as possible. The elephant in the room is the fact that legislatures reclassified the, quote, treated human excrement as Class AA fertilizer. I think that should be addressed also eventually based upon what has occurred in Blue Cypress Lake and the Stick Marsh area. I also have a photograph. I was assured by the St. Johns River Authority that they're not dumping water eastbound out of the C-54 canal directly into the San Sebastian River, which in fact 1 week ago they still are. There's thousands of gallons flowing as we speak from parts of the Stick Marsh to seepage going eastbound out of the Stick Marsh into the C-54 canal. So this is still occurring. It needs to be addressed at the governor and the legislative level, and I would implore you all to do the best you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this issue? Come on up, ma'am, and if you would, your name and address for the record.
I'm Deborah Johnson, and I live at 139 Bristol in Sebastian. This is my first meeting I've ever gone to. I must say you have a lovely meeting room. I came because when I heard about what was going on, I just wanted to support not just the moratorium on dumping that material here, but also the fact that we live in such a beautiful county, and environmentally there's challenges to keeping it that way. And I support the moratorium longer, and as the gentleman said before me, I think it shouldn't be a moratorium, it should just be decided no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, for the last
Can
couple of
explain that.
speakers that, we're talking about a permanent solution, and a lot of this activity falls under the state jurisdiction. Actually, the Presley Ranch has a permit from the Department of Environmental Protection to apply the biosolids. And so when we did the moratoriums, based upon what the county attorney recommended, is that we can probably get by with a short-term moratorium without triggering a big lawsuit. But the long-term solution would be to work with our legislative delegation and have this changed at the state level. So that's why we are just going with the 180-day moratorium for now. But be assured that this is one of our top legislative priorities coming into the upcoming legislative session. Our lobbying team is aware of this, and they know this is a huge item on our legislative list, so we will be working very hard to make this a permanent solution. But kind of technically, legally, this is the path we have to go, is through a temporary moratorium. Okay.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this issue? Morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, good morning. I'm Tim Glover, president of the Friends of St. Sebastian River. I live at 9446 Fleming Grant Road in Mecca, Florida, and I'm here to say that we appreciate your attention to this issue and addressing it. There are long-term consequences, both for public health and the environment, with the toxins coming from the blue-green algae, and it appears that they've made the link with the biosolids. So we appreciate your consideration, and we do support the next 180 days for the moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this item? There being none, I will close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Fleischer.
move the draft ordinance to extend the moratorium.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. Any further discussion?
Just a quick comment. I'd like to reiterate Dylan's comments on working with the landowners, particularly the Presleys
Yes.
and the Corrigans. You know, from the very beginning, I think this board has not wanted to make this a punitive issue, but get to the bottom based on science and research and monitoring, and then prevent any further degradation of the environment. So again, just to reiterate, we greatly appreciate the Presleys, Corrigans, and any other landowners out there for their cooperation as we move forward through this.
I'd be happy to second that. People in Indian River County are being good neighbors about this. Basically, this is something that, in my view, shouldn't have happened through a state agency, but did happen. And it's unfortunately up to us to lead the charge to try to clean it up. And I believe we're doing that. I think that I'm optimistic that we'll have success. And I'll just note, for people in the audience who don't know, right now the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is having what's called a Biosolids Technical Advisory Committee series of meetings. The next time they meet will probably be in Orlando on January 23rd. And with that meeting and probably one additional meeting, they will be coming up with some recommendations for the state of Florida to follow. I believe that those TAC meetings need to be watched very, very carefully, and that anybody who wants a good outcome, if they can pay attention to those meetings, they ought to and offer their comments.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner.
Yes, and I just want to add my appreciation for the Presleys. I think we might have discussed it, but they have allowed full access for testing, site inspection, examination, and as you all know, if you're attempting to operate a farm, that could be disruptive. And I just wanted to express a modicum of thanks too. This could have been very difficult for us to get to this point before we get to the next motion. So with that, I just want to say publicly thank you to the Presleys. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we have the motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. We move on to the second public hearing of today, the reclamation and relinquishment of ERU and release of service available charges for ERUs reserved for future use. Mr. Burke.
Good morning. For the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. On December 18th, 2018, the Board of County Commissioners, after staff update and report, voted to approve the language for an amendment to section 201.09 of the code. So we have a draft modification to the code. I believe the Attorney's Office had a minor update with respect to a date that would be included in the modification that's being presented, so that we can distinguish some ERUs that are purchased after a certain date and time. So we've attached that modification and provided a copy of that to the clerk. But in short, I can read the modification of that language, which really, I think, identifies just the date. So on page 2, on the underlined section, it said the county may reclaim any ERUs reserved for future use if a cumulative 24 months of related service availability fees become delinquent. Any impact fees paid will be applied to the account balance, and excess of such fees will be refunded for ERUs purchased after January 08, 2019. So again, the two modifications from what the agenda had initially was the word reserved that was added and the underlined, and the addition of the for ERUs purchased after January 8, 2019. So staff would certainly recommend that they open up the public hearing to take any and all comments with respect to what has been proposed, and vote to approve the modifications which have been outlined as identified. Certainly available for any questions that the board may have at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Burke? Commissioner O'Brien.
So in the very first section there, 201.08N is release of availability charges for ERUs for delinquent accounts and the 10% payment to move that forward, and then the relinquishment of the ERUs. Dylan, I know we talked about this, and I think Commissioner Adams' motion on this was that 6 months from this date, if they haven't come to an agreement, we would move forward with the foreclosure process. Does that wording need to be in this ordinance, that there's the 6-month time limit and then the resultant action would be foreclosure, or will that be handled by a letter to them, or just?
If it's the board's will, we could amend the ordinance to reflect that. We were simply just going to do that as the procedure as outlined in the board motion that was made in December.
Okay,
So
I don't really care one way or the
Yeah.
other,
And
I just want to make sure it happens.
Commissioner, sorry to interrupt, but we had also drafted a letter to notify all of those reserved ERU account holders to send it certified mail to ensure that they were aware of not only the amnesty period, which enacted last year, but also the 6 months, so that if they choose not to bring the account current or retain their initial investment, then the county would then take steps after the 6-month process so that they'd be notified. Yep.
So I'm fine with that then, as long as we make sure it's noticed, and as Commissioner Adams stated, that it gets done. The second point on that same subsection is, I think all of us had discussions with former Commissioner Wesley Davis. He can't be here this morning to speak on this, as he has other duties now, but his opinion on this was that we should not have the 10% fee to be paid. He expressed concern that a lot of these folks that are delinquent just don't have the funds to do it, and his opinion was that we would be better off just releasing this without a fee and move forward and wipe it clean. I understand his position, but kind of where I am on this is that there was a lot of other owners of these that have paid the fees and are current, and I think we're actually, in my opinion, I think we're letting them off pretty easy with just 10%, quite frankly. But I don't want to give them a free pass with no consequence, because I just think that sends a wrong message to those folks that have been paying all the time. So while I understand Mr. Davis's position and his thought process behind it, I'm still good with the 10% payment to wipe the slate clean. So I just wanted to bring that out since that had been brought up.
And Jason?
And staff is in agreement with that. We think we've gone very far here to come up with a process that allows these old delinquent accounts to get cleaned up. We need to get them cleaned up. I think we've been as lenient as we can, but we're concerned about if there wasn't the 10% charge, the kind of the moral hazard question of what about all those folks that continue to pay their their bills on time. Some of those who are in a similar circumstance to the delinquent accounts. So we think that the 10% is appropriate, and that there needs to be some additional amount so that folks, we're not just wiping the slate clean with no repercussions for accounts that were not current. Thank you.
I think part of former Commissioner Davis's argument was that the projects, because of this, may just continue to sit there, but I think that could be adjusted simply by the purchase price.
Well, we have our 6-month action, too.
Yeah, well, I mean, either way, I mean, if they don't have the 10%, then they can still sell it, and all that does is require an adjustment in the purchase price. So it's not as if it has to be frozen going forward. And I was just going to ask Mr. Burke if he has with him how many accounts, not how many ERUs, but how many different accounts would actually be affected by this at this point.
Okay, so about 1,500 total accounts, but about 30 would be in the category that would have multiple reserved ERUs that would be
Okay,
within this category.
thank you. Commissioner O'Brien?
I was just going to ask, did you want to give your traditional disclaimer at any point of this?
Well, fine, I will. I mean, basically, I have 10 or 11 ERUs that were purchased back in 1987, 89 period when they were doing an expansion. I contacted the county attorney to see if there was any possible conflict of interest, and my advice from him was that essentially there is no conflict of interest because I do not have any disproportionate benefit, if I have it correctly. And as I understand then the state law, I'm actually required to vote in this action. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Fleischer?
Yes. Could, Vinnie, when you asked that question, you said about 30 accounts. Are those the ones that are affected by the 10%?
Yes, so we have 30 accounts that have the majority of the ERUs because they were purchased in block back in 2003, 4, 5 time period. So consulting with Cindy Krente, our utility finance manager, about just over 1,500 in total, but really just 30 core accounts that would have the majority of some of these reserve ERUs.
So that many people have paid paid their premium to have those ERUs?
Yeah, in fact, as Mr. Brown had stated, we have a handful of folks that did the same, that had purchased those reserve ERUs and have been keeping their account current for over a decade. Those are the ones that have said that, yes, we've played by the rules. We're keeping our service availability current. We've maintained our capacity. And when they're ready to connect, if they were ready to connect tomorrow, we'd be obligated to provide them capacity. So it's the other ones that have not kept their account current, that have not contractually met their obligation to keep those service availability charges current.
Well, it's pretty awkward to weigh in on those 30 for the 1,500 that have been so dedicated to, I feel the same way, that, to be disingenuous and say, well, we can waive that too. So I agree with hanging on to the 10%. Thank you. Thank you for clarification.
Any other questions for Mr. Burke? Commissioner Zork?
If you took the top 2 largest of that list of 30, when you apply the 10% to them, kind of what roughly does that number come out to, just so people, when you hear 10%, it sounds like a lot to some people, not much to others, but on some of these folks, it could be a pretty significant impact to them. But again, it can be adjusted, worked out in the transaction value of the property.
I would have to guess, inclusive of not only the service availability charge, which is the base charges, but the penalties and interests that have accrued per county code, I would say it's 10% of that would be about $500,000 would be the 10% for the
Right.
top 2.
So it's some serious money for certain parties.
Yes.
I mean, that's a big number.
But
But the other problem is also a big number. They're both,
Right.
they're both large.
And keep in mind, there's a serious obligation on the utility side to provide that capacity. Say, for instance, hypothetically speaking, if all of those reserves are ready to connect tomorrow, we are obligated to not only provide the potable water, but then to take that wastewater and treat it per our DEP standards. So there's a serious obligation on our side that we have done our part, I believe, to have the capacity to have the treatment in place. And that's where we've been asked to reimburse us for those carrying costs of having that capacity available.
Hopefully, the best part will be is that this will hopefully, once and for all, either now or within 6 months, will put this situation to a close. I agree, hope. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And then just, Dylan, if I'm correct, these accounts actually have two options now, because we have the amnesty period in effect. So they can come in and pay their ready-to-use fees, but we waive the interest and penalty. Or they can go the 10% route. And so they can take a look at those numbers and see which is the least expensive and pick either route. Is that correct?
Or I believe there's a third route. Vincent and Jason, if somebody pays off all their penalties and interest, and they were to, and this, I mean, they probably would rather take advantage of this, obviously. No, if they pay off all the penalties and interest and the base facility charges and they owe nothing, then they can just relinquish.
Right, they could do that through the amnesty, though.
Right.
Be a lot cheaper.
Well, the amnesty one actually allows them to pay off and keep the ERUs.
But they could pay it off and relinquish if they wanted.
They could do that as well, yeah. And one note, Commissioner O'Brien, it would be a very small change if the board wanted to, just simply under 201.08N, just until July 8th, 2019, the Utilities Director may release service availability charges for ERUs as the rest of the sentence. So if the board was more comfortable, I'd be happy to incorporate that change so it's clear in the code that this is only available through the July 8th, 2019 date.
I really don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. Actually, I would defer to Commissioner Adams, because that's kind of her cutoff date, so if she would like it in there, I would support it, but.
I just want to make sure it happens, so whatever is the easiest way to finalize it today and make sure it happens in July, I'm fine with, whether that means inserting it or not.
Let's
then-
add the wording that this is only good till July 8th.
That's very easy to make that change.
Perfect.
And that makes it very clear to everyone, get this
Clear termination date.
wrapped up within the next 6 months.
Done.
Call that the Commissioner Adams clause.
I like that.
Put a paren in the code.
Any other comments or questions?
We'll call it the frog leg clause.
As long as you don't call it the Santa Claus.
Wow.
With that, I think that this part of the conversation is good, so we will now open the public hearing.
Should have cut it off a long time ago.
We invite anybody from the public who would like to comment on this to come forward. Anybody wish to comment on this proposal? There being none, we will now close the public hearing.
Chairman, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the proposed ordinance with the additional wording of a July 8th, 2019 deadline under section 20108N.
Second.
We have the motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second by Commissioner Fleischer. Any other discussion?
I also want to be
I'm
clear,
sorry.
it includes also the change of January 8th, 2019 and also 201.09.
Actually, that's under 20109E.
Yep, so that'll be in both places.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments or questions? There being none, we have the motion by Commissioner O'Brien, second by Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Under public discussion items, there was a request to speak by Fred Menzing, but he has informed us that he couldn't make it today, but he'll probably be on the agenda next week or the week after. So we will move to public notice items, and I'll ask Mr. Reingold to read those.
Thank you very much. The Board of County Commissioners will have a public hearing on Tuesday, January 15th, 2019, 9:05 or as soon thereafter as possible, to consider the adoption of an ordinance. This would be an ordinance of Indian River County amending Section 100.03, amendment or repeal of ordinances of Chapter 100, General Provisions of the Code of Indian River County, codifying and publishing the ordinances up to and including Supplement 128, thereto readopting the code, designating the code as the best evidence of the current law of Indian River County, Florida, and providing for severability, codification, and an effective date. Also, that same date, we will have a public hearing. This will be a ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, which will be amending Section 210.01, taxing district and levy, and Section 210.03, authorized uses of revenue, Chapter 210, tourist development tax of the Code of Indian River County, in order to allow for the 4% of the tourist development tax to be used for promotion and advertisement of tourism, and clarify the use of tourist development taxes for promotion and advertisement of tourism, and also will be providing for a codification, severability, repeal of conflicting provisions, and an effective date. Again, those are two public hearings to be on January 15th, and I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reingold. We'll now move on to utilities. We have the sole source for TSC Jacobs. Mr. Burke.
And Vincent Burke, Director Utility Services. The board may recall when Stony Brook development came in close to the West Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, there was some concerns about the odor. And so the county utility installed a large odor control unit to keep some of the odors down so that we would not have some calls to either our office or the commission office. And so this has been in place since about 2013. There's a BioRem Technologies anaerobic odor control unit. We've noticed that it has a leak in one of the main tanks that's used to degasify some of the odors and the media that helps to control some of those odors. And so it's a critical part of our operation, not only to keep the odors down, but to make sure that the unit's working properly. We are requesting a sole source because of the need to specifically repair this. It is a unit that would be serviced by TSC Jacobs, or otherwise known as JAWS, as a sole source provider for the factory certified technicians and parts for the BioRem Technologies anaerobic odor control unit. So we do have funds for this project. They're available in the R&R renewal and replacement budget and the operating fund. Operating funds are generated from our water and sewer sales. We're requesting approval in the amount of $92,750. And so we recommended the Board of County Commissioners approve TSC Jacobs JAWS as a sole source for the BioRem Technologies odor control equipment, and waive the requirement for bids for this and any other BioRem technology parts, equipment, maintenance, and service, and authorize the purchasing division to issue a purchase order to TSC Jacobs JAWS in the amount of $92,750. Certainly available for any questions that may be.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any
Move
questions?
staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second by Commissioner Fleischer. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Anybody from the public wish to comment on this one? There being none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. We move on to sole source for DPS equipment services, Mr. Burke.
Okay, again, going to another wastewater treatment plant. This is over in the central wastewater treatment facility. We have clarifiers that are designed to remove the biomass and separate the liquid from the solids portion. It's in need of refurbishment. We've maintained these units over the last 19 plus years with routine maintenance, but now some of the gears, internal parts and pieces, including but not limited the seals, bearings, race chains, drive sprockets need to be replaced. DPS Equipment Services is the sole source provider for not only the factory certified technicians, but also the parts for the Walker process equipment clarifiers at our central wastewater treatment facility. Funds for this project, again, are out of our R&R renewal and replacement budget in the operating fund, which comes from water and sewer sales. So staff is recommending that the Board of County Commissioners approve DPS Equipment Services as a sole source for Walker process equipment. Their sole source letter is attached as part of the backup, and we are requesting the board waive the requirement for bids for this and any other Walker process equipment parts, equipment services, in order to authorize the purchasing division to issue a purchase order to DPS Services in the amount of $53,800. Certainly available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Burke?
Move approval.
A motion from Commissioner Fleischer,
Second.
second by Commissioner O'Brien. I'll ask if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to comment on this issue. There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Burke. Move on to county attorney matters. The first item is 2019 committee vacancies. Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much. Pursuant to Resolution 2011-72, each year before January 15th, the board is to consider appointing individuals to fill the various vacancies on committees that are existing and have also those that have recently opened up. Pursuant to that resolution, the County Attorney's Office is presenting to you this morning a list of applicants who wish to fill some of the vacancies on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, the Agricultural Advisory Committee, the Children's Services Advisory Committee and the Economic Development Council. I will note that I received an email last night from Eric Menger, who has asked to pull his name off of the list of those to be considered for the EDC vacancy. County Attorney's Office recommends that the board consider the applicants and decide whether to appoint any of those individuals to fill these committees. I would like to add that pursuant to Resolution 2011-72, the board considers reappointments and new appointments in a two-step process. This creates a process which heavily favors an incumbent staying on a committee. I would just like to get some guidance from the board this morning, if the board wishes to provide it on the issue, as to whether the board wishes to have the County Attorney's Office examine whether to work on modifying the resolution and the process such that incumbents seeking reappointment would be considered along with potential new applicants, so that there isn't this sort of favoritism toward the incumbent folks on committees. Simply recommend that the board consider the applicants and also decide and discuss whether it wants to consider sort of a modification of the process. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. I'll ask either the county attorney or the county administrator if they actually perceive a problem the way it's presently being done.
There's not really a problem. It's just one of the things that I recognized as we were going through the process. If it's somebody says, yeah, I want to be reappointed, and then you don't really, and the board reappoints them, then you don't open up that position for the consideration of anyone else who may be qualified or more qualified to serve on that position. It just gives a bias toward the incumbent. It's not necessarily a legal problem. It was just something I wanted to present to the board after years of this process going through. I thought it might be helpful to discuss.
All right, thanks. I'll ask if the board has any comments. I mean, from my own
worry about it, no.
my own part, it's hard enough to get people to serve, so I don't know why we want to make it a little bit harder on the margin to do it or more complicated, but
I think we're cool with the way it is.
I think that's the consensus.
Yeah.
And then we need to make decisions on the committee vacancies.
So, Mr. Rangel, do you want to take these one committee at a time then?
That is an acceptable format.
Okay, so we have an Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, an applicant Cindy Dixon.
Move appointment.
We have a motion from Commissioner Adams, second by Commissioner Zork. Any comments? Anybody from the audience want to comment? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Agriculture Advisory Committee, there's one applicant,
Move appointment.
Second.
and it is for Gerald Rennick. We have the motion from Commissioner Flesher, second by Commissioner Adams. Anybody in the audience get a comment on this? There being none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to Children's Services Advisory Committee, member at large. There are 4 applicants.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I'd like to
O'Brien.
nominate Robert Schlitt. There's actually several good applicants on this list here, so this is kind of a tough choice, but Mr. Schlitt has already been very actively involved with Children's Services. He's been a volunteer on the Grant Review Committee, and so he's kind of familiar with how the process works and is now ready to step in and fulfill that role as a full-time committee member. So I would like to go ahead and recommend Robert Schlitt for the Children's Services position.
You serve on that committee, right, Peter?
Yes, I do.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second by Commissioner Zork. Any other nominations? There being none, we'll close the nominations. And I'll ask if there's anybody from the public who wishes to comment on the nomination for Mr. Schlitt. There being none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to Economic Development Council member at large. Here, there are 5, well, with the removal of Mr. Menger, there are 4 possibilities. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, before we proceed, I'd like to, if it would be appropriate, if any of the applicants are here, could we ask if they would like to say anything?
Would be happy to do that. If there are any applicants here
Are
who
any
wish
of the
to speak,
applicants here?
come on up. There being none.
Okay.
Being none, I'd like to move appointment
clear
of
that
Anna
out?
Kirkland.
We have a motion from Anna Kirkland. I'll be happy
Second.
to second it. Any other, well, any other nominations? There being none, anybody from the public wish to comment on this nomination? Being no comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Yes. And I believe, Mr. Reingold, that completes this section.
That does. Thank you very much for your assistance, and that should move us.
Thank you so much for organizing it so well and making it easy for us. We'll move on to the next item, which is the Criminal Justice, Mental Health, and Substance Abuse Reinvestment Grant.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. On September 20th, 2016, the board approved the filing of an application for a Florida Department of Children and Families Criminal Justice, Mental Health, and Substance Abuse Reinvestment Grant. The grant was for $400,000 per year for 3 years. As part of the application, Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network and the Sheriff's Office provided the necessary in-kind match, while the county's funding of the mental health court program in the sheriff's budget had served as a cash match under the grant. The county and Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network were successful in obtaining the grant, which has been used to supplement the mental health court program. On December 5th, 2018, the Public Safety Coordinating Council voted to support the filing of another grant, which would be used to supplement, to further expand on the services provided by the mental health court program. A notice of intent to file for an application is due by January 31st, and the application will be due on February 5th. The new grant does not require a cash match, and Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network believes that the same in-kind match that was provided before will be able to serve as the in-kind match for the grant application this time. At this stage in the grant process, Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network is seeking for a letter to authorize them to be designated to serve as the applicant for Indian River County again. County Attorney's Office recommend that the board approve the attached letter and authorize Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network to file a notice of intent to submit an application. If the board chooses to do so, I will be working with Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network, Judge Cox, other members of the mental health court team on the application, and will be bringing it back to the board before it is finally submitted to the state. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Reingold?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second by Commissioner Fleischer. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this item? There being none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Reingold. Moving on, we have the designating of point persons for the 2019 state legislative list of priorities. Ms. Cotner, welcome. And I just want to point out to the audience and anybody here that there's a good detail of the 10 different priorities in the backup, which might make it easy to follow this. So with that, Ms. Cotner, it's yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. For the record, Kate Kottner from the Assistant County Attorney. And on December 18th, the Board of County Commissioners approved the 2019 legislative priorities and list of concerns. As staff moves forward with its legislative strategy, it would be really helpful to have a designated point person as well as an alternate for just meetings and alike that we set up in Tallahassee and here locally. So staff recommends that the board review the staff's recommendation, which is a chart we kind of put together, and advise on any changes that you would like to make.
So I'll take it, everybody's had a chance to look at the chart. I'll just basically ask, I think Kate's done a very good job of putting this together. Anybody have any issues or changes, suggestions?
No, I just have a question. So the point person is going to act as the main person on this issue?
Yes. And so each commissioner would get 2 issues, and we tried to cognitively go through each of the issues to figure out what other boards you guys sit on, so you would have kind of expertise on those issues. But yes.
And as I understand it, this doesn't mean that everybody's welcome clearly to follow these issues as much as possible, but there are so many.
Right.
And part of it's a communication issue. If things are moving very quickly during the session, who does Kate or anybody else contact initially?
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, and that's, to me, it's a very good way of just trying to make the process work a little bit better.
Right. It's very hard to herd 5 cats in one direction, so if we can, I get that.
But with this team of cats, it was.
But we just all move in lockstep, so it's.
Move staff recommendation.
We have the motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second by Commissioner O'Brien. Anybody from the audience care to speak on this issue? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Kate, I want to thank you very much for that. I think that was well done, and it'll be good going forward. And I'll also thank you for that, the report that you send out during session. We've got the first copy of it. I think that has been, for me at least, a tremendous help in sort of following things as we go along. And it seems like the whole legislative sessions are getting more complicated, not less complicated, so the tool is more valuable than when you started. So thank you very much.
Have a great day.
With that, we have no commissioner items. We'll move on to special districts and boards, emergency services district, sole source purchase of 4 Stryker stretchers.
Move staff recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer. I'll second it. But I did want to just bring up one point. The total item is 4 stretchers for $70,446.
Right.
And this is something that I don't think the public thinks about, but that comes out to $17,612 per stretcher. And if I have it right, we have 14 frontline vehicles.
14 frontline, 3 reserve, and a new unit coming in shortly.
So just those 14 frontline units for stretchers, we're paying $246,564. Now, I have no problem authorizing or voting for the expenditure, but I think it's the type of thing that the public needs to know, because, you know, Lord knows, when I see a stretcher coming out of an ambulance, I'm not thinking we just spent 17,000 tax dollars on it. But the ambulances and equipping the ambulances are just incredibly expensive. I mean, every dollar justified, but they are a lot of dollars that go in it. And I get sort of mind-boggled when
I think a good rule of thumb for the average ambulance that's rolling down the street in this county and in most counties is about $500,000 between the initial cost, for the unit itself, the stretcher, the cardiac monitors, all the extra equipment, medications, and everything else that we carry on each one of those units. So it's about $500,000 per piece of rolling stock.
Of course, if it has that piece of medicine that somebody needs at the right time, it saves a life, so there's no argument about it, but it's just a reality. These things are incredibly expensive, and you know, we appreciate that they're there and that they help save lives, but it's sometimes seems that we spend a lot of money and it just goes someplace, but it's warranted, and to do the job the way the citizens of this county want the job done, it's certainly something we need to do. So again, I just want to point that out to the public.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Fleischer.
I just, in looking at the Stryker apparatus, that's not the stretcher, the gurney that was of years past. It's an integral part of that bus. It's extremely safe. I don't think you've had to have any serviced. They're a well-oiled machine, and they're very much needed. And I hope that nobody has to use any, but if you do, rest assured you're secure and safe as you're being transported.
That is correct, and it's not like the old Washington Furno stretchers when I
rickety ones
came up through the system where they were kind of rickety, and you actually had to manually lift and put in the back of the unit. These hydraulically lift and push in and those types of things. So
there's a lot of components to them. Thank you, Chief.
Yes,
Thank you, Chief.
That was, my comment was the hydraulic lift, because I think one of the biggest issues we have is a lot of bad backs because of lifting the weight. And so having that hydraulic lift probably saves us money in the long run, because we don't have all the workers' comp claims for bad back, so.
Thank you. And if I got it right, that was the motion from
Yes.
Commissioner Fleischer, second by Commissioner Zork?
Oh,
No, you're the second.
I'm the second. Oh, good. And with that, any other?
You can do
Yes.
it.
Question.
Commissioner Zork?
Thank you. On these stretchers will go into existing units, so we do not have to pay the additional cost, which is almost double for the rollover tie-down mechanisms, that there's some shift in new ambulances having what I call the rollover stretcher tie-down apparatus.
well, it's an auto load feature.
Right.
It's no, there's still the new KKK requirements, and that's a federal requirement.
Right.
Is now requiring that auto load feature put in there. These are compliant and will be used for the auto loads as they go in.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then on the new units that are coming in, again, calling it the rollover, that's another very expensive attachment, I think, to the Stryker. I think there's only 2 manufacturers
That's correct.
that make that.
Yes, sir.
And it's about the same cost as the actual stretcher, again, to harness and secure it in the event of a potential rollover.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Nothing is cheap in this business.
No,
but-
sir, it's not.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other comments, questions? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. And with that, very happy to announce the completion of the first 2019 meeting of the Board of
Look
County
how
Commissioners.
efficient we are in 2019.
That's one of those New Year's resolutions. We are adjourned.